Hello, I'm Chris Ripper, and I failed at 2024. Completely. When I sat down to do my annual review this year, or rather last year for 2024, I realized a somewhat depressing fact, which is that I largely failed to meet every goal that I set. That's not to say I didn't do anything. I did things. Things were done. Did those things add up to some kind of actual big picture movement or progression in my career? None. No, not at all. Nope. Very obvious in retrospect. Somehow missed it for every day all year. So one of the things that consistently reviewing progress lets you do is when you realize you've failed an entire year, you can look back and look for patterns, which I did do, and successfully, I think, discovered some patterns. There are two reasons that I completely failed 2024. The first reason is many of my goals had variables that I could not control. So if one of my goals involves another person returning emails, or someone else doing a job, or a consultant meeting a deadline, those are things I cannot control. So making them my big picture goals for the year, this is not a great thing to do. Don't do that. If you have done that, if you are looking at your goals right now thinking, oh, oops, that is a thing that I have done, I would suggest, respectfully, maybe refining those goals to make them fully within your control. You don't have to, but that would be my recommendation. And the second thing that happened, Blakey, really. The second thing I did that, in retrospect, torpedoed any notion of progress for me last year was I became so frustrated that I just stopped committing to anything. When I realized, and I could see this when I looked back at my weekly reviews, that I wasn't making progress in the way I expected to, I just stopped caring. Or rather, I just stopped trying. Hi, honey. Again, in retrospect, very clear that this was sort of an up and down pattern for my whole year. I would get frustrated with the progress or lack of progress on a goal. I would give up on that goal. I would set a new goal that was equally unrelated to anything that would actually help my big picture. And then I would very quickly give up on that goal as well. How did I get through the whole year without noticing I was doing that? I don't know. I think if you are disappointed in yourself and frustrated with yourself and have a lot of history of self-talk that doesn't add up to compassion, it is highly likely that you will just numb out at some point and stop realizing what you're doing or how you're speaking to yourself in your head, which I did in literally, I think April last year. I barely made it out of quarter one before I was completely giving up on 2024. So let's talk about the things that I'm going to do differently in 2025 so that I do not repeat 2024. One is just a basic goal setting thing, which is all of my goals have to be within my control. Every variable has to be something that I can control and I can meet independently of other people. That doesn't mean that nothing will get in the way. There's sickness, I have a child, I have animals that occasionally get sick or just have bad days that make it so it's very hard to do anything. Here's looking at you, my little anxious dog. But the bigger point is, if I have goals that are within my control all the time, then the occasional day when everything gets torpedoed doesn't completely fuck up my ability to meet that goal. Number 2, I have to build resilience. Like, I have to stop giving up on shit. I'm a quitter. I've always been a quitter. And in general, I don't have regrets about that. There are not, I don't wish that when I was in 5th grade or whenever I had continued with piano lessons. I'm not worried about that stuff. But there is a point at which quitting becomes sort of not the best thing. And I have a good track record of following through with things. I've written a lot of books. It takes a lot of not quitting to finish an entire book and then to finish editing it and getting it all the way to publication. There's a lot of not quitting built in, so I know that I'm capable of not quitting shit. But the last few years have been a little touch and go, and I think a lot of that does come back to having goals that I don't control and then getting super frustrated, which is point 3. I need to plan for obstacles and decide ahead of time how I will address those obstacles. So like the kind of classic example of this is I want to work out 3 times a week. An obstacle to me working out is that I will encounter friction when I go to get ready to work out. So I'm going to put on my workout clothes and my shoes, like ready to go, so that it's the easiest possible thing to put them on in the morning. It's not like a personally relevant example. It's just like a really common one that explains the idea. For me, maybe it would be putting out my dumbbells, because I really like lifting weights, but the act of moving the dumbbells out from their home underneath the bed is sometimes more friction than I can handle. So I need to plan for the obstacles that will get in the way of my goals. So this YouTube channel is a good example of that. I love posting on this channel. The obstacles, the biggest obstacle is perfectionism, with a sort of caveat that I also want to be able to do all the things. I want to add the sound effects, I want to add the titles, I want to add the cool B-roll, and I want to add the fun transitions, and I want to do all of that at the same time, and I don't know how to do that stuff. So each of those things takes minimum 30 minutes of Googling and fucking around before I can figure out how to add a sound. So my plan, acknowledging that this has been an obstacle in the past, is to simplify everything and start very, very simply and then move very slowly through the process of acquiring those additional skills, instead of just shooting a video every 6 months and having to relearn every single thing every 6 months. Because in the interim, I've shot lots of videos, but not fully edited them, because I was so frustrated that I had to relearn everything. So that's a basic example of how I intend to post more YouTube videos this year than I did last year. Don't wait until they're perfect and they have all the bells and whistles. Post them imperfect, but post them and continue learning. Have a plan for learning the other skills that I would like to acquire. And the very last point, and I'm still working on this, is that often when I set yearly goals and sometimes even quarterly goals, which are easier but not easy for my brain to encompass, they're not necessarily tied into the larger plan. So if my larger plan is to sustain my family on the income that I make from books in a way that is more comfortable than I do now, which is not comfortable, then I need to have goals that tie into that plan. YouTube isn't really one of them. That's just low stakes. Can I just stick with something to prove to myself that I could still stick with something? But my other goals have to do directly with the career path that I am trying to be on. They are things I control. They are directly related to either my career or my life values. So they just have to be tied into the bigger picture of my life and what I want that to look like. So those are my tips. Those are the things that I will be doing differently this year. Hopefully this time next year, I'm shooting a video on how well that fucking worked, because I cannot do another 2024, y'all. That shit was so depressing. And I recognized just how depressing it was when I went through all those reviews where I was like, every week, made no progress again. I am hoping your 2024 went better than mine and that you didn't fail quite everything. But if you did, take hope. I'm right there with you. We can and will improve. We will. We're going to make it work, as the fabulous Tim Gunn says in Project Runway. Genuinely, I think about that all the time. Make it work. We're going to make it work this year. 2025. Here we come. I'm Chris Ripper. I am really good at failing things. I am moderately good at finishing books, and I have many of them. You can buy those wherever books are sold. If they're your thing, you can support my Patreon, patreon.com/Chris Ripper. You can join me on the Facebook groups at something. Links will be in the description. I'm also on the Blue Sky and the Instagram, but I do frequently forget they exist. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.